At 6:30 in the morning, the alarm clock rang. Ethan Morrow reached over and pressed the button. Next to him, Lauren turned onto her other side, pulling the blanket up to her chin. He leaned over and kissed her cheek gently. "I'll make coffee," he whispered. Lauren mumbled something unintelligible in response, but didn't wake up. Ethan smiled. 7 years of marriage, and he still loved watching her sleep. In the kitchen of their rented house in Ravenwood, he turned on the coffee maker and pulled 2 mugs from the shelf, a blue one for himself and a red one for her. Outside the window, the sky was graying. In half an hour, the sun would rise over their typical American town in Pennsylvania, where everyone knew each other, if not by name, then by face. The town was small. One main street with a Walmart supermarket, Johnny's Burger, Brody's Auto Shop, where Ethan had worked for 10 years, and a couple dozen other stores. On the outskirts was an auto parts plant where a quarter of the town worked. Lauren worked there in the accounting department. When the coffee was ready, Ethan poured himself a cup and looked out the window into the backyard. The small patch of lawn needed mowing, but the weekend promised rain. Maybe he could carve out some time tonight. "Good morning." Lauren walked into the kitchen, bundled up in her robe. Her brown hair was disheveled and her eyes were still sleepy. "Hey, sleepyhead." Ethan handed her a red mug. "How did you sleep?" "Fine." She sipped her coffee. "Thank you." It was their morning ritual. Coffee, a few minutes of silence before starting the day, a brief exchange of plans. "We have 2 Ford and a Chevy Milliken today," Ethan said, spreading jam on his toast. "Nate promised to come over to help with the Chevy because the transmission was acting up." Lauren nodded slightly, looking down at her mug. "I have a quarterly report today," she said. "I might be late." "Do you want me to pick you up?" "No." She shook her head. "Alice can drop me off or I can take a cab." Ethan frowned. "Since when did you start taking cabs? It's a lot of money." "Sometimes you can afford it," Lauren shrugged. "Besides, I don't want to keep you from your work." They ate breakfast in the usual silence. During their 7 years of marriage, they no longer felt the need to fill every pause with conversation. Ethan sometimes thought that was the beauty of a long relationship, the comfortable silence. At 7:45, Ethan kissed his wife and left the house. His old Jeep was parked in the driveway, next to Lauren's compact Hyundai. He got behind the wheel, started the engine, and turned on the radio. He listened to the local news and weather forecast on the way to the workshop, nodding occasionally to familiar pedestrians. Brody's workshop was a 15-minute drive from their house. It was an old brick building with a large garage door and a faded sign. Inside, it smelled of machine oil, rubber, and metal, an odor that had become native to Ethan. "Hi, Marcus," he nodded to the owner, a 60-year-old man with graying dark hair and oil-stained hands. "Morning, Ethan," he replied. "The Fords are here. The Chevy will be here by 10. Ethan changed into his overalls and began to work. His hands worked almost automatically. He knew every curve, every screw of the machines he worked with. Marcus often joked that Ethan felt machines the way others felt people. At 10 o'clock, a black pickup truck pulled into the workshop yard. A tall man with blonde hair and a wide smile got out of it. "Hey, old man," he shouted, heading toward Ethan. "Hi, Nate." Ethan wiped his hands with a rag and shook his friend's hand. Nathan Kennedy had been his best friend since high school. They'd gone to school together, played soccer together for the high school team, gone to college together, though Nate had dropped out after freshman year and gone into the family business, a construction company. "What's up?" Nate asked, looking around the workshop. "Is Lauren okay?" "She's fine." Ethan nodded. "How are you?" "Can't complain, buddy." Nate clapped him on the shoulder. "Tell me, what's going on with the box at Milliken's?" They leaned over the Chevy together. Working side by side, they discussed the latest news, exchanged jokes, recalled common stories. Nate talked about a new contract to build a shopping center in a nearby town. "We'll be working with the federal guys," he said proudly. "This is a big step for the company." "Congratulations," Ethan replied sincerely. "Your father would be proud." Nate gloomed for a moment. "Yeah, I guess so. Mr. Kennedy died 3 years ago of a heart attack, leaving his only son a small but stable construction firm. Nate had been working hard to expand the business ever since." "How is Fiona doing?" Ethan asked, remembering his friend's younger sister. "Still in New York," Nate shrugged. "She calls once a week, telling me about some exhibitions, fashion shows. I don't even always know what she's talking about." Ethan smiled. Fiona Kennedy had always stood out in their small town, an artist with big ambitions. She'd gone to New York right out of high school and only showed up in Ravenwood at Christmas or Thanksgiving. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they were done with the Chevy. Nate wiped his hands and looked at his watch. "Shit, I gotta go," he said. "The meeting with the contractors is at 3. How about a beer on Friday? Johnny's as usual?" "Done," Ethan nodded. "Thanks for your help." Nate waved and headed for his truck. Ethan glanced at him and then went back to work. There were still 4 hours left in the day. On the way home in the evening, Ethan stopped at the supermarket. He and Lauren had agreed that he did the shopping on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she did the rest. It was part of their little agreements that made life together easier. At the store, he met Mrs. Patel, their neighbor who taught math at the local school. "Hello, Ethan," she smiled. "How's Lauren?" "Fine, thank you," he answered. "She asked me to buy spices for the chicken. She wants to cook something Indian today." "Oh, that's wonderful!" Mrs. Patel exclaimed. "I can recommend a good curry recipe if she's interested." "I'd appreciate it," Ethan nodded. They exchanged a few more words and Ethan continued shopping. When he had a full basket of groceries, he paid and went out to the parking lot. By the time he pulled up in front of the house, it was almost 7 in the evening. Lauren's car wasn't in the driveway. Ethan remembered what she'd said about being late at work because of a report. He unloaded the groceries and started cooking dinner, nothing fancy, just spaghetti with the meat sauce they both loved. Lauren returned at 8:30. Ethan heard the front door slam and came out into the hallway. "Hey," he said. "Rough day?" Lauren looked tired. Her hair was in a sloppy bun and shadows lingered under her eyes. "Yeah, these reports are killing me," she sighed, taking off her coat. "Smells good." "Spaghetti." Ethan helped her take off her coat. "Dinner is ready if you're hungry." They ate dinner in the kitchen, discussing their day. Lauren told about problems with documentation at the factory, about gossiping colleagues, about how their boss had reprimanded a new employee. Ethan listened, occasionally inserting comments and talking about his day. He mentioned Nate in passing, saying only that he'd helped with the Chevy. After dinner, Lauren went to shower while Ethan cleared the table and loaded the dishwasher. Then he sat in the living room and turned on the TV. The sports channel was showing a baseball game, but Ethan's thoughts were far away from the game. He was thinking about his life, about the routine that was pulling them deeper and deeper. Once upon a time, he and Lauren had dreamed of traveling, of having their own home, of having children. But as the years passed, their dreams remained dreams. They were still living in a rented house, still saving for a down payment on their own place, still talking about kids as something that would happen someday later. Lauren came out of the bathroom in her bathrobe with wet hair. "What are you watching?" she asked, sitting down next to me. "Baseball," Ethan answered, though he didn't even know what teams were playing. "By the way, I met Mrs. Patel. She promised me a recipe for Indian curry." "Oh, that's great." Lauren smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. "I'll try it this weekend." They sat for a while longer looking at the screen, but not really watching the match. Then Lauren yawned. "I'm going to go to bed," she said. "I have to get up early tomorrow. I'll be there soon." Ethan nodded. When she left, he sat alone in the living room for a while. Her cell phone was on the coffee table. Lauren always carried it with her, but today she must have forgotten it. The screen lit up. A message had come in. Ethan wasn't going to peek, but the sender's name popped up automatically. Alice. Thanks for today. Same time tomorrow? Ethan frowned. Lauren had said she was working late on the report. Maybe she and Alice had labored together? Or had a glass of wine after work? That would be okay. Lauren deserved a vacation with her friends. The phone lit up again. Another message from Alice. Nate will be there too. Ethan felt a slight prick of worry, but quickly pushed the thought away. Nate was working with the plant's contractors on a new project. He'd mentioned it himself. It was probably a business meeting. Besides, they were all friends. What was odd about them getting together? He turned off the TV and went into the bedroom. Lauren was already asleep, curled up on her side of the bed, or pretending to sleep. Ethan undressed, lay down next to her, and turned off the nightlight. In the darkness, he stared at the ceiling and thought about the fact that tomorrow would be an ordinary day, just like today, and yesterday, and the day before. In the morning, over a cup of coffee, Lauren asked, "Have you seen my phone?" "In the living room on the table," Ethan answered. "You left it there yesterday." She quickly went after him, and when she came back, she looked a little tense. "Is something wrong?" Ethan asked. "No, nothing's wrong," she answered too quickly. "I was just afraid I'd missed an important message from my boss." Ethan nodded, pretending to believe her. He worked mechanically that day, his thoughts far away from the workshop. He thought back over the past weeks, months. Lauren had indeed started staying late at work more often, or said she was late. She talked less about her day, less interested in his life. It was as if an invisible wall had grown between them. "You're paranoid," he said to himself. 7 years of marriage is no joke. Sure, relationships change. Of course, routines come up. That's normal. After work, he stopped by the flower store and bought a bouquet. Nothing fancy, just some daisies and wildflowers, which Lauren liked better than roses. Maybe they just needed to remind each other why they were together. When he got home, Lauren was still gone. He put the flowers in a vase and started cooking dinner. An hour later, she called. "Ethan, I'm going to be late tonight," she said. "Don't wait up with dinner." "What happened?" he asked. "The same old thing," she sighed. "Reports, paperwork. You know how it is at the end of the quarter." "Sure," he replied. "Take your time." Ethan ate dinner alone, putting a plate in the microwave for Lauren. Then he sat down in the living room with a book, but he couldn't focus on the text. The words blended in front of his eyes, and his thoughts returned to the messages he'd seen yesterday. Lauren returned at 11. She smelled of perfume, stronger than usual, and alcohol. "Sorry I'm so late," she said, kissing him on the cheek. "The girls and I decided to relax a little after work." "It's okay," Ethan replied. "I left you dinner in the microwave." "Thanks, but I'm not hungry." Lauren noticed the flowers in the vase. "Are those for me?" "Yes," he smiled. "Just for fun." "They're beautiful." She touched the petals. "Thank you." Something flashed in her eyes. Guilt? Regret? But so quickly that Ethan wasn't sure if he was imagining it. "I'm going to take a shower," she said. It had been a long day. When she disappeared into the bathroom, Ethan walked over to her purse, which she'd left on the couch. He'd never gone through her things before, but now something made him open the bag and look inside. Among the makeup, keys, and wallet, he saw a small bottle of perfume, not the kind Lauren usually used, and a business card. He pulled it out. "Nathan Kennedy, CEO, Kennedy Construction." On the back was handwritten, "Meet me at 8. Don't be late, gorgeous." Ethan put the business card back down, just as it lay, then closed his bag and returned to his seat with his book. His heart was beating too fast, and there was a lump in his throat. When Lauren came out of the bathroom, he pretended to be engrossed in his reading. "Aren't you coming to bed?" she asked. "Soon," he answered. "I'll finish the chapter." She nodded and went into the bedroom. Ethan remained sitting in the living room, staring at the page of the book but not seeing a word. Something inside him snapped, but he wasn't ready to admit it yet. For the next 3 days, Ethan watched. He listened to Lauren's phone conversations as she spoke in a muffled voice from the other room, noting her moods which changed from tense to overly playful to cheerful. Tracked how often she stayed late at work and how often she mentioned Nate in conversation, almost never, though they used to regularly discuss his business successes or funny stories from their shared past. Friday night, they were going to meet Nate at Johnny's, their traditional Friday night meeting place. Ethan figured it was the perfect opportunity to observe them both. He tried so hard to act normal, as if nothing had changed, that he was even surprised at his own acting talent. "Are you going to Johnny's today?" he asked at breakfast, trying to make the question sound casual. Lauren was stirring her cereal in the milk with a spoon. "Yeah, sure. The usual, huh?" "The usual," Ethan nodded. "Nate should be here at 7. Lauren looked up from her bowl, and Ethan saw something flicker in her eyes for a split-second: anxiety, anticipation. But she got over it quickly. "Great," she said in an even tone. "I'll meet you there after work." The day in the workshop stretched on endlessly. Ethan tried to concentrate on his work, but his hands moved mechanically and his thoughts were far away. He tried to talk himself into thinking that it was all a silly suspicion, a play of imagination, that the business card in Lauren's purse could refer to a business meeting. After all, the plant was partnered with Nate's company. Maybe it really was just a job. At noon, his phone vibrated. A message from Nate. "Can't make it today. Sorry, buddy. Business. Next time." Ethan stared at the screen. Business? What business? Nate never missed their Friday night get-togethers unless something extraordinary was going on. And why was he canceling now, hours in advance, even though he'd confirmed his attendance yesterday? Before he could think about it, the phone rang. Lauren. "Hi." Ethan's voice sounded normal, steady. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing," she answered, but a little too quickly. "I just wanted to tell you that I can't go to Johnny's tonight. We're having problems with the database, so I'll have to stay late." Ethan felt his heart skip a beat. "I see," he said after a pause. "Well, Nate just canceled too. Looks like everyone's got things to do today." He heard Lauren on the other end of the line inhale sharply. "Really? What did he have going on?" "I don't know. I didn't go into detail," Ethan lied. "But it's no big deal. I'm tired today anyway. I'd better go home and watch a movie." "Okay." Lauren seemed strangely relieved. "Don't expect me for dinner." After hanging up the phone, Ethan stood staring at himself for a few minutes. Then he slowly wiped his hands with a rag and walked over to Marcus. "Can I leave early tonight?" he asked. "I have personal business." Marcus gave him an attentive look. He'd become almost a father figure to Ethan over the years, and he could read his moods. "Sure thing, kid," he nodded. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, I just have a few things to take care of." Ethan tried to smile, but it didn't come out right. 20 minutes later, he was already driving through the familiar streets of Ravenwood. He wasn't going to drive home, to their empty house, where pictures of a happy couple that probably didn't exist anymore hung on the walls. Instead, he parked at the mall, pulled out his phone, and opened the app that tracked Lauren's location. They'd installed it a year ago when Lauren had gotten stuck at night with a stalled car on the side of a deserted road. They hadn't used the feature much since then, but they both knew their phones were tracking each other. If Lauren was late for work, the signal had to be coming from the factory. The signal was coming from the Pine Forest Motel on the outskirts of town. Ethan felt the ground slipping from under his feet. The Pine Tree Motel was an unassuming place where mostly salesmen and tourists passing through town stayed. It was about a 20-minute drive from downtown Ravenwood. Ethan knew the way there was a gas station where he and Nate often ate dinner on their way back from fishing trips. He put his phone on the passenger seat and stared at the road in front of him. Part of him wanted to drive immediately to the motel, burst into the room and, what, make a scene? Hit Nate? Break down in tears? The other part desperately resisted the obvious. Maybe this is some kind of misunderstanding, he thought as he started the car. Maybe there really is a business meeting there. On the way to the motel, Ethan tried to think of explanations. Lauren could have stopped by her dentist, whose office was somewhere nearby, or meeting a friend who was staying at the motel. Or he couldn't think of a third explanation that sounded plausible. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when he pulled up to the Pine Barrens. The parking lot in front of the motel was nearly empty. There were rarely many guests here in the middle of the week. Nate's black pickup truck was conspicuous. Ethan parked in the far corner of the lot overlooking the motel entrance and the door to room 12, where his friend's truck was parked. He turned off the engine and waited. 15 minutes later, the room door opened and Nate came out. He looked around as if checking to see if anyone he knew could see him, then quickly got into his truck and drove away. 10 minutes later, Lauren came out of the same room. She was dressed in a business suit but looked disheveled. She looked around, too, then took a quick step toward her car, which was parked on the other side of the parking lot. Ethan sat in his Jeep, gripping the steering wheel so tight his fingers turned white. He felt nauseous. He couldn't believe what he was seeing with his own eyes, and at the same time he suddenly realized he wasn't surprised. Part of him had long suspected something like this. He waited until Lauren's car disappeared around the corner before he started the engine. He didn't know where to go. Home? To Marcus's? To the bar? In the end, he chose to just drive around the outskirts of town until he calmed down enough to make some kind of decision. The day was drawing toward evening when Ethan finally decided to go home. He knew Lauren wouldn't be there. She'd said she'd be late for work. He wondered where she'd actually gone. Back to the factory to maintain her legend, or maybe shopping in a neighboring town to have an alibi. The house was quiet and empty. Ethan walked into the kitchen, took a beer out of the fridge, and sat down at the table. In front of him was a vase of flowers he'd given Lauren 3 days ago. They were already starting to fade. He took a big sip of beer and closed his eyes. Scraps of memories flashed through his mind. Lauren and Nate dancing at their wedding. Nate toasting their 5th anniversary. Lauren laughing at Nate's joke during a barbecue last summer. Him handing Nate a tool himself as they fixed the car together. How long has this been going on? He thought. A few weeks? Months? Years? He felt betrayed twice, by both his wife and his best friend. Felt like an idiot who hadn't noticed the obvious. Felt bitterness, anger, despair, and a strange numbness, as if everything wasn't happening to him, but to someone else he was watching from the sidelines. Ethan's phone rang, snapping him out of his musings. It was Marcus. "Hey, kid," he said. "How are you doing in there?" "Fine," Ethan answered, surprised at how ordinary his voice sounded. "Why?" "Just checking in. You didn't look so good when you left." "I'm fine," Ethan lied. "I'm just tired. I'll come back tomorrow as usual." "Good," Marcus said after a pause. "You know, if you need to talk." "Thank you, Marcus, but it's really okay." Ethan hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. Then he opened his contacts and found a number he hadn't used in a while. Fiona Kennedy. He didn't know why he was going to call Nate's sister. Perhaps because she was the only link to the Kennedy family that didn't make him want to break anything. Perhaps because she'd always been a little apart from their tight circle, an observer from the sidelines. Or simply because he needed someone to talk to, someone who knew both him and Lauren and Nate, but wasn't too close to any of them. But he didn't press the call button. Instead, he put the phone away and went into the bedroom. Ethan opened the closet and pulled out a suitcase. At first he wanted to start packing, to go somewhere, leaving a note or even without one, to just disappear from Lauren's life. But then he stopped himself. No, that would be too easy, too soft for both of them. He set the suitcase back down and went back into the kitchen, opened another beer and began to think through a plan of action. 1. He wouldn't make a scene. No yelling, crying, begging, or threatening. Lauren and Nate didn't deserve that kind of reaction. 2. He wouldn't just leave. He wanted them to realize what they'd done. He wanted to see their faces when they realized they'd been caught. 3. He'd gather evidence, irrefutable, clear evidence of their betrayal. Ethan took another sip of his beer and felt a cold resolve spill inside. He pulled out a notebook and a pen and began to write things down. Dates, events, oddities in Lauren's behavior he'd noticed over the past few months. Coincidences in Nate's schedule and her work delays. Little details that individually seemed insignificant but added up to a clear picture of betrayal. He was so absorbed in the task that he didn't immediately hear the front door open. When he looked up, Lauren was standing in the kitchen doorway. She had a strange expression on her face, a mixture of guilt and worry. "Hi," she said. "You're back early." Ethan quickly closed his notebook. "Yes, tired today," he answered. "And you? Did you solve the problem with the database?" Lauren nodded, avoiding his gaze. "Yeah, everything's fine. I just popped in to change. We're having a corporate retreat today. I told you last week." Ethan didn't remember any mention of corporate, but he nodded. "Of course I remembered. Have fun there." Lauren looked surprised by his calm response. "Is that okay with you? I can stay home if you want." No, go ahead," Ethan even smiled. "I have beer and TV. I have enough entertainment for the evening." Lauren smiled back uncertainly. "Okay, then I'll quickly change and go." While she was in the bedroom, Ethan sat motionless, listening to her open the closet, the rustle of clothes, the closing of the bathroom door. He tried to figure out what he was feeling. Anger? Absolutely. Pain? Yes, deep and sharp. But also something new he hadn't experienced before, the cold, calculating, almost clinical detachment with which he was watching. When Lauren came out of the bedroom, she was wearing a black cocktail dress and high-heeled shoes. Her hair was gathered into an elegant bun, and around her neck was the thin silver pendant Ethan had given her for their 5th anniversary. "How do I look?" she asked, twirling around in front of him. "Beautiful," he answered, and it wasn't a lie. She really did look fine, and that made it hurt even more. "I don't know when I'll be back," Lauren said, picking up her purse. "Don't wait up for me." "I won't," Ethan nodded. "Have fun." When the door closed behind her, he went to the window and watched her get in her car and drive away. Then he went back to his notebook and added a new entry. Friday, evening, corporate. He was sure there was no corporate party. Lauren was going to meet Nate, maybe at a restaurant in a neighboring town where no one knew them, maybe back at the motel. Ethan picked up his phone and opened the tracking app. Lauren's car was heading toward the exit of town. He decided not to follow her, not today. Today, he needed to gather his thoughts and plan his next steps. He remembered reading once about the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. It seemed he was past denial. Now he was somewhere between anger and bargaining. A part of him wanted to destroy everything around him. Another part of him still hoped that this was some terrible misunderstanding, that everything could be fixed. But deep down, he knew the truth. Their marriage was broken. Maybe it had been broken for a long time, and Ethan was just now noticing it. Or maybe he just didn't want to notice. He finished his notes, closed the notebook, and stashed it in his desk drawer. Then he walked through the house, looking at it with new eyes, the eyes of a man who wouldn't be living here anytime soon. On the walls hung pictures from their trips, from holidays, from their wedding. Happy faces that now seemed like masks. The bedroom smelled like Lauren's perfume. Ethan opened the closet and ran his hand through her clothes. How many of those dresses and blouses had she worn to meetings with Nate? How many of them had she come home after their dates, kissed him on the cheek, and told him she loved him. He closed the closet and sat on the edge of the bed. On the bedside table at her side was the book she'd been reading for the last few weeks, some love novel with a screaming cover. A nightlight stood next to it, and headphones lay on the bed. Ordinary, everyday things. So familiar he'd stopped noticing them. Ethan lay back on the bed and stared up at the ceiling. A strange calmness swept over him. He knew what he had to do next. He would be patient. He would be careful. He would gather all the evidence and set them up to face the truth they had been so careful to hide. He pulled out his phone and found Fiona's number again. This time, he pressed the call button. "Hello?" Fiona's voice sounded surprised. They hadn't spoken in probably a year. "Hi, Fiona," Ethan said. "It's Ethan Morrow. I'm sorry for the unexpected call." "Ethan?" She seemed even more surprised. "Is something wrong? Is Nate okay?" Ethan grinned bitterly. Nate was more than okay. "Nate's fine," he answered. "I'm calling about something else. Are you planning on coming to Ravenwood anytime soon?" "Actually, yes," Fiona said after a pause. "I have a trade show in 3 weeks in New York, but I wanted to come home for a few days before that." "Why?" "I need to talk to you. In person." "That sounds serious." I could hear the concern in her voice. "Is it something with Lauren?" "You could say that," Ethan answered, "but I'd rather discuss it when we meet." "Okay," Fiona said slowly. "I'll be in Ravenwood in a week. I'll call you when I get there." "Thank you," Ethan said. "And Fiona, don't tell Nate I called." There was a long pause. "Okay," she said finally. "I won't. Good night, Fiona." "Good night, Ethan." He hung up the phone and stared at the ceiling again. This was just the beginning. He didn't know how it would end, but he was sure of one thing. He wouldn't be blind and naive anymore. He would see the truth no matter how bitter it was. And he would make sure Lauren and Nate saw it too. Ethan woke up to an empty bed on Saturday morning. Lauren still hadn't come home. He lay looking at the empty half of the bed and thought that even a week ago this would have caused him worry, panic, calls to hospitals and the police. Now he just felt dull pain and fatigue. His phone vibrated. A message from Lauren. "Got caught up in the corporate party, stayed over at Alice's. I'll be there this afternoon." He didn't answer it. Instead, he opened the tracking app. Lauren's phone was in a house across town. Ethan knew that address. Nate lived there, not Alice. He got out of bed, showered, and made himself some coffee. Then sat down in front of his laptop and started looking up information on hidden cameras. 2 hours later, he placed an order for 5 miniature devices with delivery to Marcus's auto repair shop address. He didn't want the package to arrive home and Lauren to accidentally discover it. Ethan spent the whole weekend at home, doing the usual things, cleaning, cooking, even fixing the leaky faucet in the bathroom that he'd been meaning to fix for a long time. He deliberately gave the appearance of normalcy, of a normal day off. When Lauren got home around 3 in the afternoon, he greeted her with a smile, as if nothing had happened. "How was the corporate party?" he asked as he helped her out of her coat. "Great," Lauren replied, avoiding his gaze. "I drank too much, though. My head still hurts." "I made chicken soup," Ethan said. "Do you want some?" Lauren looked at him with surprise and gratitude. "Yes, thank you. That would be great." They spent the evening at home watching some reality show on TV. Lauren dozed off on the couch, resting her head on his shoulder. Ethan watched her face and thought how easy it would be to just continue living like this, in a comfortable lie, pretending nothing had changed. Part of him still loved her, despite the betrayal. That part wanted to forget everything he'd learned and just be with her. But the other part, the part that was growing stronger by the day, wanted justice or revenge. Sometimes Ethan himself didn't know what it was that drove him. Monday at work he was distracted. Marcus had asked him several times if everything was okay, but Ethan had just given him generalities. After lunch, he got a call from Nate. "Hey, buddy, sorry about Friday," he said in a cheerful voice. "I had a lot of work to do with this new contract." "That's okay," Ethan replied, surprised at how natural his voice sounded. "I understand." "Why don't we catch up this Friday?" Nate suggested. "I'll make a reservation at Johnny's for 8. "Sure," Ethan agreed. "I'd be happy to." When the conversation ended, he felt nauseous. Talking to Nate in a friendly tone, knowing he was sleeping with his wife, was hard, but necessary if he wanted to gather all the evidence. On Tuesday, the package with the cameras arrived. Ethan hid the box in the trunk of his car, and on the evening Lauren left for yoga class. Another lie. He checked the schedule of the studio where she supposedly worked out, and there were no group classes there on Tuesday. He set up the devices in the house. He placed one camera in the bedroom facing the bed, another in the living room, a third in the kitchen, and a fourth in the hallway by the front door. The fifth he kept in reserve. All the cameras were wireless and transmitted the images over the internet to a secure server that only Ethan had access to. They activated when motion was detected and started recording. In addition to the cameras, Ethan installed a program on Lauren's phone that copied all of her messages and sent them to him. It only took him a few minutes with her phone while she showered. He knew the password. It was their wedding date. The irony didn't escape him. Wednesday night, while going through Lauren's messages, he came across a correspondence with Nate. It was brief and businesslike, as if they were careful to leave no digital trace of their relationship. "Meeting at 3? Yes, same place. Papers will be ready." Obvious code phrases. Ethan felt everything inside clench. It was one thing to suspect, and quite another to see proof. This short correspondence made the treason real, tangible. On Thursday, Ethan accidentally ran into Nate outside a coffee shop downtown. It was lunchtime, and Nate had apparently just finished a business meeting. He was wearing a suit and carrying a leather briefcase. "Ethan," he exclaimed, clearly surprised and a little concerned. "What are you doing here?" "I'm having lunch," Ethan pointed to the cafe. "And you? You look impressive in that suit." Nate relaxed a little. "I'm meeting with investors, trying to get funding for a new project. Any luck?" "Sort of." Nate glanced at his watch. "Look, I'd love to chat, but I have to run to another meeting." "Sure," Ethan nodded. "I'll see you at Johnny's tomorrow?" "Absolutely." Nate patted him on the shoulder and walked quickly away. Ethan watched him and thought that in 7 years of friendship, Nate had never once given him reason to doubt his loyalty. He'd always been there for him, always supportive. And now it was all a lie. That evening, Ethan decided to follow Lauren. She said she was going to a book club meeting, but instead she went to the same Pine Tree Motel. Ethan watched from afar as she entered room 14. 10 minutes later, Nate arrived there as well. Ethan sat in the car for 2 hours, feeling a cold rage building inside him. When Nate finally left the room, Ethan almost got out of the car to walk toward him, but he held back. It wasn't time yet. Friday morning before work, he'd checked the security footage at the house. Nothing unusual. Lauren had gotten home around 10 p.m., showered, and gone to bed. Ethan came in later, around 11, and lay next to her, trying not to touch her. They slept in the same bed, but as strangers. At work, Ethan was distracted. He nearly cut his hand twice and dropped a heavy tool on his foot once. Marcus noticed his condition. "Kid, what's going on with you?" he asked him when they were alone in the workshop. "You haven't been yourself lately." Ethan looked at Marcus, wondering if he should tell him the truth, but he decided that he wasn't ready to discuss it even with his closest friend. "I just don't get enough sleep," he answered. "Nothing serious." Marcus shook his head incredulously, but didn't insist. At lunchtime, Ethan got a call from Fiona. "Hi," she said. "I arrived in Ravenwood this morning. Can we meet?" Yes, Ethan answered, feeling relieved. When? Maybe tonight? Ethan thought back to his meeting with Nate and Lauren at Johnny's bar. I have plans tonight, he said, but I can meet you after work, around 5. Okay, Fiona agreed. Where? You know the Morning Star Cafe on Maple Street? Yeah, I'll be there in 5. The Morning Star Cafe was in a quiet part of town, away from the places Nate and Lauren usually went. Ethan got there early and took a table in the far corner. When Fiona walked in, he didn't immediately recognize her. She had changed since the last time they'd met. Her hair was shorter, her style of dress more urban, more New York. Hi, Ethan, she said, sitting down across from him. Hi, Fiona, he tried to smile. You look good. You don't, she said bluntly. What's wrong? Ethan looked down at his coffee cup, gathering his thoughts. Then he looked up and said, Lauren is cheating on me with Nate. Fiona didn't look surprised. She nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd long suspected. Are you sure? Absolutely, Ethan answered. I have proof. He told her everything. About the business card in Lauren's purse, about the overheard phone calls, about the surveillance of the motel. He didn't mention the cameras in the house or the program on Lauren's phone. That part of his investigation seemed too personal to share even with Fiona. When he finished, she took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Ethan. You don't look surprised, he remarked. Fiona looked away. I suspected something like that. Nate had changed in the last year, more secretive. And when I asked about you and Lauren, he always changed the subject. Why didn't you say anything? What was I supposed to say? Fiona waved her hands. Hey, Ethan, do I think my brother is sleeping with your wife? I had no proof, just a feeling. Ethan nodded. He understood her. Who would want to accuse their own brother of such a betrayal? What are you going to do? Fiona asked after a pause. I haven't decided yet, Ethan answered, though that wasn't entirely true. A plan was already forming in his head. But I'm not just going to put up with it. I understand. Fiona covered his hand with hers. If you need help. Actually, Ethan straightened up. There is something you could help me with. He told her about his wedding anniversary idea. The 7th anniversary was in 2 weeks, and Ethan planned to throw a party where he would expose Lauren and Nate to all of their friends and family. I want them to feel the humiliation, he said. The same humiliation I feel every day when I wake up next to a woman who lies to my face. Fiona was silent for a long time, pondering his words. It's cruel, Ethan, she said at last. But I understand your desire. What do you want me to do? I need an accomplice, he answered. Someone to help me organize everything so that they don't suspect anything. Someone I can trust. And you trust me? Fiona raised an eyebrow. Even though I'm Nate's sister? That's exactly why, Ethan said. You're the only person they won't suspect of cooperating with me. You can tell Nate you're here for our anniversary. He won't be surprised if you're involved in the preparations. Fiona twirled the cup in her hands thoughtfully. What exactly are you planning? Ethan told her his plan. He wanted to rent a small room in a local restaurant, invite close friends and relatives, arrange everything like a normal anniversary party. And then, at the climax, show video evidence of Lauren and Nate cheating in front of all the guests. I ordered a special box for Lauren, Ethan said. She'll think it's a new ring or jewelry, but inside will be the divorce papers I've already signed. Fiona looked at him with widened eyes. Are you sure you want to go that route? It's pretty drastic. I've never been so sure, Ethan replied firmly. They deserve to be publicly humiliated, both of them. Even if Nate is my brother. It's your decision, Fiona, Ethan shrugged. I understand if you refuse to help. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I will help you. Not because I agree with your method, but because you deserve justice. and because Nate needs to be held accountable for his actions. Thank you. Ethan felt the tension he'd been carrying around for the past few days ease a little. I appreciate it. They spent the next hour discussing the details of the plan. Fiona agreed to help with booking the room and inviting guests. She also offered to distract Nate the day of the party so Ethan could discreetly set up the equipment to show the video. By the time they finished, it was almost 7 in the evening. Ethan looked at his watch and remembered the meeting at Johnny's bar. I have to go, he said. I have a meeting with both of them. Can you pretend you don't know anything? Fiona asked anxiously. I've been doing it for 2 weeks now, Ethan grinned bitterly. A couple more hours wouldn't make a difference. Fiona walked him to the door of the cafe. Be careful, Ethan. Don't do anything rash. Don't worry, he replied. I've thought it over carefully. They exchanged phone numbers, agreeing to call the next day to discuss the next steps. Then Fiona hugged him, unexpectedly warm for someone they'd never been particularly close to. Take care of yourself, she said. And remember, whatever happens, it's not the end of the world. Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. Then he got into his car and drove to Johnny's bar, where his wife and best friend, who had betrayed him in the most painful way possible, were waiting for him. He was to spend the evening pretending he knew nothing about their secret meetings, about the Pine Forest Motel, about all those nights Lauren said she was working late. He had to laugh at Nate's jokes, discuss sports and politics with him, listen to his stories about his business successes. He was supposed to smile at Lauren, put his arm around her waist, maybe even kiss her on the cheek. And all the while, he'd be thinking about his plan, about how in 2 weeks everything would change, how their cozy little world of lies and pretense would crumble, how they would stand in front of all their friends and family, humiliated and ashamed. The thought gave him strength. He parked outside the bar, looking at Nate's car already parked in the lot, and felt a strange satisfaction. They'd thought they'd tricked him, that he was too stupid or too gullible to notice their betrayal. Soon they would find out how wrong they had been. The morning of their 7th wedding anniversary began like a normal day. Ethan woke up at 6:30, even earlier than his alarm clock. Lauren slept next to him, turned away from the wall. For the past 2 weeks they had hardly spoken, only exchanged casual phrases at breakfast or dinner. Ethan had purposely created the appearance of distance to make his plan work perfectly. Let Lauren think he'd lost interest, that the marriage was just running out of steam on its own. It would make the surprise of the party even more unexpected. He got out of bed, trying not to wake her, and went into the kitchen to make coffee. Opening the refrigerator, he saw the bottle of champagne he had bought yesterday especially for this morning. All these years they had started their anniversary day with a glass of champagne and a toast in bed, a tradition Ethan had decided to honor no matter what. He pulled out a tray, 2 glasses, sliced some fruit, put the croissants from the bakery on the corner that he'd bought last night on a plate. Everything was the same as always, as if nothing had changed. He opened the champagne, filled the glasses, and returned to the bedroom. Good morning. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, trying to smile. Happy anniversary. Lauren slowly opened her eyes. Her face showed surprise, then embarrassment, and finally relief. You remember, she said, pulling herself up on the pillow. 7 years. Ethan held out his glass to her. Of course I remember. They clinked glasses, looking at each other. Ethan saw guilt mixed with tenderness in her eyes. He wondered what she was thinking. Did she regret her actions, or just for continuing to live with him when her heart belonged to someone else? I made a reservation for tonight, Ethan said, sipping his champagne. At the Riverview. I invited a few friends. Fiona helped with the arrangements. Fiona? Lauren frowned. Nate's sister? I didn't know she was in town. She got here last week, Ethan shrugged. She wanted to surprise us for our anniversary. That's nice of her, Lauren looked a little confused. Who did you invite? Marcus and his wife, a couple of your friends from work, my parents, your sister. Ethan listed the names, watching her reaction carefully. And Nate, of course. At the mention of Nate's name, Lauren flinched a little but quickly got over it. Sounds great, she said, returning the glass to the tray. What time do we need to be there? 7, Ethan answered. We have the whole day ahead of us. They ate breakfast in bed, exchanging memories of the past years. It was strange to remember the happy moments of their marriage, knowing that everything had been ruined by betrayal. Ethan felt like an actor in a play, playing the part of the happy husband, but he had to keep the play going for a few more hours. After breakfast, they got dressed and drove to the mall. Ethan said he wanted to buy Lauren a gift, and they spent a few hours going from store to store. He noticed her lingering near the ring display case and mentally chuckled. Yes, she was expecting a ring. Perhaps a new engagement ring or an anniversary ring. Something expensive and shiny that would affirm his love and devotion. Instead, she gets a very different gift. Did you pick anything out? He asked, coming up behind her. No, just looking, Lauren replied, stepping away from the display. You don't need to buy me anything expensive, Ethan. 7 years of marriage deserves a special gift, he said. But I already have something for you. You'll see it tonight. They had lunch at the mall cafe, then stopped by the house so Lauren could rest before the party. Ethan said he had a few things to take care of with the organization and left. He actually went to the Riverview restaurant to check on the preparations for the evening. Fiona was already there, talking to the manager about table arrangements. Hi, she said when she saw Ethan. How's everything going? As planned, he replied. Lauren doesn't suspect a thing. And the video? Fiona lowered her voice, looking back at the manager. It's all set, Ethan nodded. I brought the flash drive with the recording and I'll check the projector now. They checked the technical equipment, making sure everything was working properly. Ethan uploaded a Video A compilation of short clips showing Lauren and Nate together. There was footage from the cameras in the house, phone shots he'd taken during the stakeout, screenshots of messages. There was enough material to leave no doubt about their relationship. Are you sure you want to do this? Fiona asked when they were done. It's not too late to call the whole thing off. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. I've never been so sure about anything in my life. Fiona nodded, not trying to talk him out of it anymore. What are you going to do next? She asked. After all this? Leave, Ethan answered simply. I don't know where yet. Away from Ravenwood, that's for sure. I understand. Fiona touched his arm lightly. If you need a place to stay in New York. Thank you. Ethan smiled weakly. I'll think about it. They finished their preparations around 5 o'clock. Ethan had 2 hours before the party started. He decided not to go home but to go to Marcus's house. The old man knew something was wrong, but he didn't ask questions. He just offered Ethan a beer and turned on the baseball game on TV. At 6:30, Ethan returned to the restaurant, changing into the suit he'd left in the car. The tables were already set. The waiters were preparing aperitifs, and quiet music was playing in the room. On a small stage in the corner was a projector aimed at the white wall. Everything was ready. Ethan's parents were the first to arrive. His father, a tall man with graying temples, and his mother, a petite woman with kind eyes. They hugged their son, the mother kissing him on the cheek. "Where's Lauren?" she asked, looking around. "She'll be here soon," Ethan answered. "She's picking up her sister." It was true. He had insisted that they come separately, saying that he had business at the restaurant. Lauren agreed without question. Gradually, the room filled with guests. Marcus and his wife came, several of Lauren's co-workers from the plant, Ethan's friends from college. Everyone congratulated him, asked about Lauren, joked about the 7-year itch and how quickly time flew. Ethan smiled and thanked them for their congratulations, but inside he felt only coldness and determination. At 7 o'clock, Nate showed up. He looked a little tense, but smiled a wide, confident smile. "Buddy," he hugged Ethan. "Happy anniversary. 7 years is serious." "Thanks for coming," Ethan replied, patting him on the back. "You're my best friend. How could I celebrate this day without you?" There was a double meaning in the words, but Nate didn't seem to notice the irony. He walked back to the bar where he ordered a whiskey on the rocks. Ethan watched him glance nervously at the door, waiting for Lauren to show up. She arrived at 7:15 with her sister Emily. Lauren looked stunning in a long blue dress that emphasized her figure. Her hair was done up in an elegant updo, and a silver necklace, Ethan's 5th anniversary gift to her, glistened around her neck. "Sorry I'm late," she said, walking over to Ethan and kissing him on the cheek. Emily couldn't find the right shoes. "It's okay," Ethan replied, putting his arm around her waist. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. Ethan noticed Lauren cast a quick glance toward the bar where Nate stood. Their eyes met for a moment before they both looked away. The party had begun. Guests ate, drank, talked, and congratulated the happy couple. Lauren stayed close to Ethan, smiling, laughing at jokes, but he could feel her tension. She avoided Nate's direct gaze, though they found themselves side by side several times throughout the evening. Around 9 o'clock, when most of the guests had finished with dinner and moved on to dessert and coffee, Ethan walked up to the small stage and took the microphone. "Friends, family," he began. "Thank you for coming today to share this special day with us. 7 years ago, Lauren and I exchanged vows of loyalty in front of many of you." He paused, looking at Lauren, who was looking up at him with a strange expression on her face, a mixture of tenderness and guilt. "7 years is a long time," Ethan continued. "Enough time to really get to know a person, to see his real face." Something in his tone made Lauren wary. She frowned slightly, not sure where he was going with this. "I've learned a lot about Lauren over the years." Ethan smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "Like the fact that she likes cinnamon coffee in the morning, that she can't fall asleep without an open window, even in the winter, that she snores when she has a cold." The guests laughed. Lauren smiled too, but tensely. "But I recently learned something new about her." Ethan's voice grew harder. "Something I'd like to share with all of you." He pressed a button on the remote he held in his hand. The projector turned on, and the first frame appeared on the wall, Lauren entering the Pine Forest motel room. The guests fell silent. Lauren went pale, her eyes widening with horror. Nate, standing at the bar, froze with a glass in his hand. "You see," Ethan continued, pressing the button again, "my wife has been leading a double life for some time now." The images on the wall changed. Nate walking into the same motel room, screenshots of messages between Lauren and Nate, a picture of their cars parked side by side in a deserted spot outside of town, camera footage showing Lauren talking on the phone in the bedroom, laughing softly and saying, "I miss you too." No, he doesn't suspect a thing. There was dead silence in the hall. Lauren sat with her hands covering her face. Nate took a step forward, then stopped, not knowing what to do. "I'm not going to show you the more intimate moments," Ethan said, turning off the projector. "I think it's pretty clear to everyone. My wife and my best friend betrayed me in the most painful way possible." He stepped down from the stage and walked over to Lauren. She looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. "Ethan, I can explain," she began. "There's no need," he interrupted, pulling a small velvet box out of his pocket. "I have a present for you for our anniversary." He held out the box to her. Lauren automatically took it with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was not jewelry, but folded papers, a divorce petition already signed by Ethan. "Happy anniversary, Lauren," he said quietly, but in the complete silence of the room, his words were audible to everyone. "I hope you and Nate will be happy." He turned and walked toward the exit. As he passed Nate, he grabbed his arm. "Ethan, listen." Ethan pulled his hand out of his grip. 7 years of friendship, Nate," he said. 7 years. And all that time you've been there, smiling at my face, shaking my hand, telling me we're like brothers. And then you went and slept with my wife. "It's not what you think," Nate tried to object. "We didn't mean to hurt you." "We didn't mean to hurt you?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "Then what do you think you were doing? Doing me a favor?" Nate lowered his eyes, unable to find an answer. Ethan shook his head and continued toward the exit. No one tried to stop him. Fiona, standing at the door, nodded at him and he nodded back, silently thanking her for her help. It was chilly outside. Ethan took a deep breath of the night air, feeling oddly relieved. It was over. The masks had been dropped. No more pretending that everything was okay, that his marriage could still be saved. He got into his car and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, he saw guests coming out of the restaurant, some alone, some in pairs, all with confused or shocked faces. His parents, Marcus and his wife, Lauren's co-workers, witnessing the collapse of his marriage. Ethan felt no shame for making a public scene. Lauren and Nate deserved this humiliation. They deserved everyone to know what they'd done. He pulled out of the parking lot and headed toward a motel on the outskirts of town. He'd booked a room in advance, not the one where Lauren and Nate were meeting, but another at the far end of the building. He'd spend the night there, and tomorrow he'd start a new life. Without Lauren, without Nate, maybe even without Ravenwood. Driving past their house, not his house anymore, Ethan felt no desire to stop, to pick up his things, to see once more the rooms where they'd been happy. Everything he needed was packed in a suitcase that lay in the trunk. The rest could stay with Lauren, as a reminder of what she'd lost. At the motel, he checked in, went up to the room and sat on the edge of the bed. Only now, alone, did he feel himself start to shake. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving him empty and tired. He didn't cry. There were no tears, only the deafening pain and the realization that 7 years of his life had been based on a lie. Ethan lay on the bed without undressing and stared at the ceiling. He thought about the future, which was now uncertain but free of betrayal. That tomorrow he could go anywhere, start fresh. Maybe go to New York, as Fiona had suggested, or to the West Coast, where no one knew him. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. Not happiness, that was still a long way off, but the certainty, the clarity he'd been missing for the last few weeks. He'd done what he had to do. The rest could wait until tomorrow. Ethan's phone rang. Fiona's name popped up on the screen. He hesitated for a second, then answered. "Hi," he said. "Where are you?" she asked. "I'm worried." "At a motel outside of town," Ethan answered. "It's okay, really." "It was chaos after you left," Fiona said. Lauren was sobbing. Nate was trying to comfort her. The guests didn't know where to go. It was impressive. "Do you regret helping me?" "No," she answered firmly. "They deserved it, especially Nate. He should have been better." There was a pause. "What are you going to do now?" Fiona asked. "I don't know yet," Ethan answered honestly. "I'll leave town, that's for sure. Maybe I'll take you up on your offer and come to New York." "I'd be glad to," she said with a warm smile. "By the way, I'm not going home either. I'm staying at the Riverview. If you want to talk—" "Thanks," Ethan said. "Maybe tomorrow. Right now I need to be alone." "Sure," Fiona replied. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night." He put the phone on the nightstand and closed his eyes. Their 7th wedding anniversary was over. Tomorrow a new chapter of his life would begin. What it would be like, he didn't know yet, but he was sure of one thing. There would be no room for betrayal and lies. 4 months had passed since that night at the Riverview restaurant. 4 months of a new life for Ethan Morrow. New York City greeted him with noise, bustle, and anonymity, just what he needed after Ravenwood, where everyone knew his story. Here no one looked at him with sympathy. No one whispered behind him as he passed. Here he was, just one of millions, and it gave a strange sense of freedom. Ethan rented a small apartment in Brooklyn, found a job at an auto repair shop not far from home. It paid less than Marcus's, but it was enough. Plus, he'd gotten half the value of their joint property with Lauren for the divorce, and that money was sitting in a bank account almost untouched. Today was a day off, and Ethan woke up later than usual. The sun was already shining brightly through the thin curtains, illuminating the simple but cozy room. He stretched, feeling a slight ache in his muscles. Yesterday he and Fiona had gone to the climbing center, and he had overworked his arms. The thought of Fiona made him smile. Who would have thought his former best friend's sister would become his best friend, and more? Their relationship had developed slowly, cautiously, as if they were both afraid of scaring away the fragile trust that had built up between them. After that night at the motel, Ethan kept his promise and called Fiona the next morning. They met for breakfast at the cafe at Riverview, and she told him about the aftermath of his leaving. Lauren tried to find him, calling his parents, his friends. Nate had sought him out too, whether to apologize or to express outrage at his public exposure, but no one knew where Ethan was. As Fiona had said at the time, the town was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. Some supported Ethan, while others thought he'd done too cruel a thing by publicly humiliating her. Some even defended Lauren and Nate, saying, "You can't follow your heart." That day, she and Fiona sat in the cafe until lunchtime, just talking. Not just about what had happened, but about life in general, about New York, about her career as an artist, about his plans for the future. Fiona suggested that he come to New York with her, at least temporarily, until he could decide what to do next. "I have a big apartment," she said. "The couch in the living room is quite comfortable. You need a change of scenery, Ethan." And he agreed. They left the next day, he in his Jeep, she in a rented car. Before leaving, Ethan stopped by the house while Lauren was at work and picked up the rest of his things. He left his keys on the table and drove away without looking back. The first weeks in New York were a blur. Ethan woke up on Fiona's couch, drank coffee, stared out the window at the unfamiliar cityscape, and tried to realize that his marriage was over, that his best friend had betrayed him, that his life in Ravenwood was a thing of the past. Fiona didn't rush him. She'd leave for her studio every morning, return in the evening, and they'd have dinner together, talking about everything but Lauren and Nate. Sometimes she'd take him to shows or museums. Sometimes they'd just walk around the city. Gradually, Ethan began to come out of his stupor, began to notice the beauty of New York, its energy and possibilities. After a month, he found a job in an apartment. Fiona helped him with furniture. She had many friends among artists and designers who gave away or cheaply sold unwanted things. From Ravenwood came the divorce papers, signed by Lauren. Ethan signed and sent the papers back, feeling oddly relieved. Marcus called several times, asking how he was settling in, offering to come back to the workshop. His parents called too, worried. Ethan answered everyone that he was fine, that he was starting a new life. He didn't think about going back to Ravenwood. Nate tried to contact him once, sent a long message apologizing and explaining. Ethan had read it, but hadn't responded. What was there to say? Some betrayals didn't deserve forgiveness. He hadn't heard from Lauren other than the official divorce papers, and that too was for the best. Ethan got out of bed and went into the kitchen. He put on the coffee maker, took eggs and bacon out of the refrigerator. Making breakfast for two had become a habit over the last 2 months when Fiona had started spending most of her time in his apartment. Their first kiss had happened spontaneously while walking through Central Park. It was a warm evening and they were sitting on a bench by the lake talking about an exhibition they had just returned from. At one point, Fiona stopped talking, looked at him with a strange look, and then just leaned in and kissed him. Ethan responded, marveling at how natural it felt. Then they talked for a long time about the complexity of their situation, about the fact that she was Nate's sister, that to many people their relationship would look like revenge on his part, about how they both hadn't fully recovered from past wounds, Ethan from Lauren's betrayal, Fiona from the breakup with her ex, which she'd said little about but enough to make Ethan realize the wound was still fresh. They decided to take it slow, to let the relationship develop naturally. And in the months since, their bond had only grown stronger. Fiona was not like Lauren, more direct, more passionate, more unpredictable. With her, Ethan felt alive, real. She didn't try to change him or pretend everything was always perfect. They could argue, disagree with each other, but they always found a way to reconcile. The bedroom door opened and Fiona stepped into the kitchen. Her dark hair was disheveled from sleep and she was wearing his t-shirt, which reached her knees. "Good morning," she said, walking over to him and kissing him on the cheek. "It smells delicious." "You're just in time," Ethan replied, turning the bacon in the pan. "Sit down, it's almost ready." Fiona poured herself some coffee and sat down at the small kitchen table. She watched him with a smile that did something strange to his heart, something warm and a little frightening. "Ethan," she said suddenly, "I want to talk to you." He turned around, noticing the seriousness in her voice. "Is something wrong?" "No, not really." Fiona took a sip of coffee. "It's just, I've been offered a big project in San Francisco, an installation for the new Museum of Modern Art." "That's great." Ethan turned off the stove and turned to her. "Congratulations. When are you leaving?" "That's the thing." Fiona looked at him straight on. "It's not a short-term job. It's a year-long project, maybe more. I'll have to move there." "Oh." Ethan felt something clench inside. He walked over to the table and sat down across from her. "I understand. I want you to come with me," Fiona said, looking into his eyes. "I know it's a big request. You're just starting to settle in here. You've got a job, an apartment, but I don't want to lose what we have between us." Ethan was silent, pondering her words. Moving to the other side of the country. A new beginning. But wasn't that what he'd wanted when he'd left Ravenwood? Wasn't this the new life he'd dreamed of? "When do you want an answer?" he asked at last. "I have to tell them my decision in a week," Fiona said. "And if I agree, I will leave in a month. But Ethan, I don't want to pressure you. If you're not ready, I understand." He reached out and took her palm in his. "Give me a few days to think about it, okay?" Fiona nodded with relief. She'd been afraid he'd say no right away. "Sure. And by the way, whatever you decide, I don't want this to be the end for us." Ethan smiled. "I don't want it to be the end either." They ate breakfast, talking about plans for the weekend. Fiona wanted to show him the new exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art, and he agreed, even though modern art was still a mystery to him. He loved watching her reactions to paintings and installations, seeing her eyes light up when she found something that struck her. After breakfast, they left the house and walked to the subway. The day was clear and warm, typical of early fall New York. Walking beside Fiona through the busy streets of Brooklyn, Ethan thought about her proposal. San Francisco, California, another move, another new beginning. 4 months ago, sitting in a motel on the outskirts of Ravenwood, he couldn't have imagined that his life would change so much, that the pain of Lauren and Nate's betrayal would slowly fade, leaving behind not bitterness, but a strange sense of gratitude. If it hadn't been for their betrayal, he never would have left Ravenwood, never would have gotten to know Fiona so intimately, never would have discovered a new world of possibilities. The museum was crowded. Fiona led him confidently through the halls, explaining the concepts of the various works. Ethan listened, sometimes asking questions, but more watching her. The way she gestured when talking about her favorite artist, the way she tilted her head when looking at a complex installation, the way she occasionally looked back at him, checking to see if he was bored. "Are you really interested, or are you just putting up with this for me?" she asked when they stopped in front of the abstract sculpture of metal and glass. "I'm interested," Ethan answered honestly. "I don't understand everything, but I like to see the world through your eyes." Fiona smiled, and something tender and vulnerable flashed in her eyes. "I love you, Ethan," she said softly. "I hadn't planned on saying this today, but I just want you to know." Ethan felt his heart skip a beat. Those words hadn't been spoken between them before, even though they'd both probably felt it for a while now. "I love you too," he replied, surprised at how easily the words came off his lips and how sincere they were. Fiona snuggled up to him, and they stood like that for a few minutes, embraced in the middle of the museum hall, ignoring the curious stares of the visitors. "I'll go to San Francisco with you," Ethan said when they finally pulled away from each other. "I don't want to lose you. And frankly, I like the idea of starting over." Again, Fiona's face lit up with joy. "Are you sure? It's a big decision." "I'm absolutely sure," Ethan nodded. "I don't have anything here that I can't leave behind, except you." They spent the rest of the day making plans, talking about San Francisco, about what their life would be like there. Fiona talked about the museum, about the project she had been offered, about how it might affect her career. Ethan listened, asked questions, and felt a growing excitement, a new city, new opportunities, a new life, with the woman he loved. That evening, when they returned to his apartment, Ethan pulled out the bottle of wine they'd been saving for a special occasion. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," Fiona echoed, clinking her glass with his. They sat on the small balcony of his apartment, watching the sunset over Brooklyn. Fiona rested her head on his shoulder, and Ethan put his arm around her, feeling a peace he hadn't felt in a long time. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "sometimes I think everything happens for a reason. All these painful things we go through, they lead us to where we need to be." Ethan pondered her words. Would he be here, with her, if it weren't for Lauren and Nate's betrayal? Would he have been ready for this new relationship, this new love, if he hadn't gone through the pain of losing his old one? "I think you're right," he finally said. "I don't believe that everything is predetermined or that there's some grand plan, but I do believe that we can find meaning even in the most difficult of trials." "And what meaning have you found?" Fiona asked, lifting her head and looking at him. Ethan smiled, looking into her eyes. "You, us, this new life we're building." Fiona kissed him, and in that kiss was the promise of the future they would create together. A month later, they left New York. Ethan sold most of his belongings, leaving only the essentials. They rented a small truck to carry boxes of Fiona's work and her art supplies and set off across the country. The trip took a week. They stayed in small motels along the road, explored roadside attractions, and photographed the scenery that changed from state to state. It was a time out of time, days filled with conversation, music, laughter, and silence. Fiona would doodle in her sketchbook while Ethan drove, and then they would switch and she would get behind the wheel while he looked out the window at the fields, forests, mountains, and deserts whizzing by. When they finally arrived in San Francisco, the sun was setting over the bay, coloring the sky and water in shades of gold and purple. They stopped the car at an observation deck overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge and just stood holding hands, looking out over the city that was to be their new home. "We're here," Fiona said, squeezing his hand. "A new beginning." "A new beginning," Ethan agreed, wrapping his arms around her. There was no more room in his heart for bitterness or anger, only gratitude for the path that had brought him here and hope for the future they would create together. No matter what happened next, he knew he could handle it. They would make it together. The sun had finally disappeared over the horizon, and dusk had fallen on the city. The lights of San Francisco glowed, reflecting in the dark waters of the bay. Ethan and Fiona got back into the car and headed toward their new home, their new life.